Hello and welcome to this tutorial. In this painting, I'm going to be showing you how I tackle some beautiful backlit willows. This original picture was taken in Arunya Park and I am painting it around 2 months later, but it was during winter and it was just absolutely beautiful that day. And before I start, I want to talk really quickly about the mentorships that I am offering. So this year, I am teaching 3 semesters, and in each semester, I'm mentoring 5 students. The spots are first come, first serve, and if you are looking to improve your skills in traditional or digital painting, I am here for you. We'll be doing one-on-one critiques. I'll be giving you personalized homework and, of course, live demos catered to what you want to see. So go ahead and check out my website at www.tiffaniemang.com for more info. Click on the Mentorships 2020 tab and you can read all the info about the mentorship and also how to sign up. So I hope you guys check that out. Anyways, now back to the tutorial. So right now I've just finished toning my canvas and I always tone it yellow ochre or burnt sienna, so I have a warm undertone. And what I'm using is a Coldpress Illustration Board. So I'm painting on a 6x6 inch Coldpress Illustration Board. I cut all my own boards now, and I just get like a big board from Blick, like a 20 by 30 inch, and I just measure it and I cut them with a razor. And for the paints, I'm using Windsor and Newton Designer Gouache. And I'm just using a Windsor and Cotman watercolor flat brush and an Escoda round brush, a 3/4 inch flat brush, and I think around a 16 size round brush. Now, what initially stuck out to me about this painting was that beautiful glow in the willow tree, and I really want to capture that with the contrast in this painting, so that is my goal. I want to try to simplify the background and really add more textural complexity where the leaves are lit. There's also a balcony with some people feeding some ducks, so that's going to be challenging to paint too. So we'll see how this all goes. Every painting is, of course, always a challenge. I struggle on this painting too, as you'll see. So you are not alone there. Everyone struggles, and that's how you learn. Now, as you can see, the first step that I always do is blocking in my bigger shapes. So right now, I feel like since I toned my canvas yellow ochre, with a little bit of water, I'm going to use that as my basis for the glow of the tree, and I'm going to carve out the glow with the shadows around it. So that's why right now I am just painting all my shadow shapes. And luckily this painting does the reference does a really, I guess does a job for me of really easily grouping my shadows and my lights. This is one of those paintings where it's easier to see obviously what falls in the light and what falls in the shadow. So I don't need to do too much thinking there. What the tricky part I think about this painting is really getting the shapes of the trunk interesting of the tree, which I struggled with a lot. And also I feel like the back trees, the back tree shadows are a little bit, it's a little bit of a straight line. So I might sort of tweak the shape a little bit more varied. So right now I'm just putting down some dark colors. I'm more worried about the corrective value right now more than the color. I always pay attention to the value first and tweak the color later. And I use a technique with dry brushing. I've been increasingly fascinated with that to get really subtle textures towards the end of the painting. But that is, of course, done after my values more or less are situated first. So like I said, you'll see me struggle a lot, I think for the most part. Later I had to sort of turn off the camera. I think I got a little nervous, so I did a little bit off-camera painting, and then you can see me sort of complete the painting towards the end where I do these final touches. But you can see me do majority of the block in, majority of the painting. Now you're probably wondering, what colors am I putting down right now? Because of course when you take pictures, I really do believe you lose a lot of the color. So I'm also relying really on my feeling of what I saw when I first witnessed this landscape. And you know, maybe in the reference picture below, you know, it's mostly, you know, muted greens and a little bit of purples maybe it's just straight gray to you. I don't know, everyone perceives color differently. But what I really feel is I'm going to try to push these really subtle purples and say lavenders, dark purples in the trees, in the tree trunk, and in the back foliage, back trees. I want to have simplified into these muted greens with desaturated reds and some purples. And when I squint in the reference picture, to me the foliage and the lake kind of become one. So I want to simplify that mask group. And I don't want to add too much detail because I really want the texture to lie in the tree, in the backlit yellow leaves of the willow tree. So that's where I want my area of interest to be. Not so much in the background, not so much in the shadow. So it's really important, of course, when you're painting to choose an area of interest and not have everywhere have too much texture or nowhere have any texture, because then your painting will just be bleh or overwhelming. So it's always good to have that hierarchy. Now, as you can see, I'm starting to just overlay more of those vibrant yellows, those warm, more saturated yellows. My tone canvas did a little bit for me, but now obviously it's not enough. So just starting to lay those in. And you can see I'm sort of using the dry brush technique, but not so much. I'm putting down color, and I'm also smudging it, quote unquote, with just a little bit of water in my brush. And right now I am, for the majority of the time, sticking with my flat brush. For most of you who don't know, I mainly paint with a 3/4 inch flat brush, Windsor and Cotman watercolor brush, and a round Escoda brush. I think it's size 16. It's pretty big. I don't go any smaller than that for my 6x6s, which is this, a 6" by 6" piece. And I use the same size brushes for my 2x2" pieces, 4x6, 6x8, you name it. I should probably go even bigger for bigger pieces. But I am happy with these. I like to just simplify my brush use, because in the end it's just easier. If you're going to go out and plein air paint, you don't want to be fumbling around with different brushes, figuring out which brush you're going to use. When the light is changing, you want to be able to use the tools you have at your disposal to get the most effective point across, but with the less amount of tools. So now I'm switching to the round brush a little bit, just trying to add some texture. Funny story, I used to hate the round brush. I didn't know how to use it until one day I had an aha moment, and I was like, okay, the round brush is really great for organic things such as foliage, which is what I'm painting now. And just really, for me, I like using it towards the end to get really interesting edges. So the flat brush really lets you carve out some interesting shapes. And then the round brush really kind of kicks those edges up to the next level, so to speak. So that's how I like going back and forth with those brushes. Now you can see here, my tree, I'm not happy with it. It's not really coming out like I want it to. It's not standing out from the background as much as I want it to. I have this vision of this, I don't know, I really like how graphic the reference image is. Like, it's graphic, but not, because it's, the tree's so organic, but in the way there's this really nice graphic shape that the tree makes with its backlit leaves. So I really want to try to get that in my painting, and I'm not sure how right now, but that's okay. It's okay to be not sure how, but kind of figure it out on the journey. So if you're not sure halfway, with a painting, don't give up. Just keep going. I guarantee you will figure out something along the way if you have will. A lot of times I wanted to give up. I almost wanted to give up on this painting. That's why I had to turn off the camera a little bit. I think I was like, oh my goodness, I don't think I'm going to be able to figure it out. I just needed some calm me moment time, to figure it out on my own. And whatever it takes, just don't give up. Just keep pushing yourself. That's what I always tell all my students. So for me, this might be a personal preference, but I personally really like painting drier with gouache. I like applying thick thick areas of texture, less water. I just really like the look. Some people paint really matte with it and not a lot of texture, and some people paint really watercolory. There's no right or wrong way. Whatever gets your vision across, right? So that's just my preference, and you'll see me, add more and more paint on. So right now I'm still working on finessing my shapes. Really not happy with how my tree trunk looks. It looks like a gnarly hand. I don't know. It's just too uniform, I think. So I'm going to work on hopefully trying to spice that up a bit, make it a little bit more interesting. I really like how the reference looks. I'm going to try to stick with that. Things like tree trunks really confuse me. It's like, like so many things going on. Sometimes your brain can get confuzzled. but it's just important to be able to squint at your reference and be able to distill it to simple shapes. And that's why I always go back to simple shapes, simple shapes. That's what's going to help you in the end, squinting and simplifying. So you can't tell in the reference, but there are some people standing on the balcony feeding ducks, and you can see the little flakes of gold on the lake. That are some ducks. Those are some ducks. So I'm going to paint those in, but I'm not too worried about that. Those things I know I can paint in towards the end or whenever. Right now, again, I am more preoccupied with making sure that my bigger shapes sit well together, and I'm not going to focus really on detail until I'm more happy with that. So now you can see I'm playing more around with the tree trunks, just shifting some things around a little bit. Now a tip, as I put in the top right corner, for things like foliage is using the dry brush technique to apply more texture to the canvas. And what I mean simply is just using less water and more paint and just lightly brushing it on. It's not heavily pushing your paintbrush on the canvas. It's taking more paint, less water, and lightly brushing it on your canvas. So you can try that out at home if you want. Just play around on a piece of paper and just play around getting different textures with gouache. Or not, with gouache, and just playing around with the amount of water and more paint. Sometimes more paint, less water, more water, less paint. And see what sort of textures and, I guess, consistencies you get. And it's quite fun. So as you can see now, I am starting to add a bit more shifts in color. I'm trying to stray away from what I think I see in the photo to what I feel like my heart is telling me, as cheesy as that sounds. So I'm adding these sort of purples just in some places. That was the wrong value I just put on there, so I need to fix that in the background. And so I'm smudging that out right now. Uh-oh, a little bit too light now. It's all good. Gouache is very forgiving. That's the wrong value too. So you see how when I put the wrong value down, it just totally stands out. I need to even that out now because it's a little bit dark. Now I am aware that the darkest area in the painting is right by the lightest area, and I do want to simulate that because that's going to create more contrast. There's like this little shadow right by the balcony. I think that's really cool. And you can see how the tree is starting to be carved out a little bit more because now I am bringing out my darks a little bit more. But it's still too dark in the background in that middle area. I need to even that out. It's standing out like a sore thumb, and I don't want that. So I'm smudging down. So at this point, I'm using the smudge effect. I'm taking a little bit of water on my brush, no paint, and just pulling down. That's a technique I use a lot of the time. I mean, really, that's all. That's it. It's just adding more paint or more water. Really, that's it with gouache. It's pretty simple once you get the hang of it. There's no really magic trick or anything. So right now, just to simplify it, I am just taking a little bit of water, not too much. Too much, it'll just make your whole painting smushy and watery. So just a little bit of water on your flat brush and pull down. I do that a lot when I'm not happy with a lot of things going on my painting or a certain area, and I'm like, this needs to all go away. Let's just quote unquote erase it. And I just take my brush, drag down, and voila, it's somehow eased out and simplified. So always squint and step back periodically to see if your values are working. I do this with my paintings when I'm painting outside or painting indoors. I step back and I just squint. Right now, I'm definitely struggling with that balcony. I actually have no idea how to paint that balcony. It's so small. So let's see how I tackle that later. But always squint even if the painting's in front of you, because chances are you can get tunnel visioned and just, it's really easy to get tunnel vision and then not see how it looks like from a different point of view, and I think that's really important. So you can see now I'm just smudging and smudging because I think the edges on the balcony are a little bit too hard. And even though the balcony is made out of wood and it is hard, it doesn't always translate like that into a painting. You have to have, your balance of hard versus soft edges and strategically choose where to put that. So I'm just playing around with that still. Apologies if I speak too fast, by the way. I hope I am going at an okay pace. I tend to jabble really fast when I'm excited, but hopefully you guys can understand me. So I think at this point I have evened out my values a little bit. There's still some areas that are like there, right there, too dark. Fixing that a little bit, dry brushing on top. And I think my tree trunk looks a bit better. But obviously there's still so many things to add. It's not how I pictured it in my head. And I will honestly say I'm still a little bit frustrated with it. There's still a lot of things that are not working out for me. So that is, obviously part of the problem solving journey. But now you can see, as I've laid it out, the shapes I think are reading a little bit better. The tree is standing out more. Obviously I need to define the lake from the back trees, because it's not one mass. It is one mass, but now that we have painted it one mass, it's time to now go into those little details and start separating the masses into slightly smaller elements. Not smaller, but different elements as they're needed, if that makes sense. So I always work from general to specific, per se. So now it's kind of the fun part. Now it's kind of the time, I think, where I start to slow down a little bit. And I start to really think how I can enhance certain areas. Obviously, there's still a lot to do. I need to define the balcony a little bit more, but it's a little bit of slowing down time. So the balcony, I think, reads a little bit better. The edges aren't as... I like how the top part is a little bit softer, the top part of the balcony, and then the bottom part with the darker shadows, I'm really trying to carve it out that way. And you can't see in the photo, in the reference, but there's really subtle value change of the legs of the balcony that go into the shadow of the lake. So I'm going to try to just catch those subtle changes. And of course, adding the reflection on the lake, on the water, is very important too, which will indicate that it is water. And with that, I'm just using the round brush and I'm using the dry brush technique. So I'm piling on more paint, mixing a little bit of yellow and white, and just sort of dragging it down like that. So now I'm switching more to my round brush, as you can see, and I am trying to just get those smaller areas. The round brush is great for just implying those leaves, those vertical leaves that are falling over certain tree branches, and that, I think, those details can be added towards the end. You want to make sure the shape of your trunk is good before you start adding little details like adding those leaves in front, because you're going to be dry brushing on top, which I think personally is the best technique. I'm a little bit happy with how my tree trunk shape is. And as you can see, my tree trunk, although you can't really see in the reference, I'm really trying to infuse these warm and cool shadows. So I have some purples, some warmer areas with a little bit of burnt sienna with purple in the top areas of the trunk. And towards the bottom part, I'm keeping it a little bit cooler with those purples, like I said. So with this, it's more about experimentation. I wasn't sure how it would turn out, but I wanted to push some areas. You can see I haven't added the people yet. I'm kind of waiting towards the end. They're a little bit scary to add. I don't want to screw it up. So, gonna wait a little bit. Yeah, you can see that I am starting to add more texture in my main area. My main area of focus is right where the balcony is, where the people will be, and where that bright light of leaves just hang over there. I really love that area. So that's where I'm going to add the most of my texture. In other areas in the background, I'm smudging it down, like I said before. So I'm trying to darken my values here. There's also these nice foreground elements of these raggedy plants or branches, I guess, from a plant coming from the top, bottom left corner, and I want to try to get that too. So later you'll see how I carve those shapes out a little bit more. And of course, there's just a hint of light on the mid left. So I'm going to have to bring that back out too. So I think this is a good base and a good block in. Now what I'm doing is I'm working negatively. So I'm trying to carve back in some shadow holes to play with the shape a little bit of the light. So I do this a lot. I go back and forth. I'll paint light on top of shadow and shadow on top of light. I never really work systematically, like, oh, paint the background first, then paint the midground, then paint the foreground. I'm always working positively and negatively with space. And I love that way of thinking. To me, it makes a lot more sense than working consecutively or working logically, per se. That's just how the way I work. And I highly encourage that to switch it up a little bit. All right, so now I have taken some time off the camera to tweak it a little bit, and you can see how the painting has evolved a bit. So now I am more towards my final stages. You can see how I have added the people and added some foreground branches in the top, bottom left corner. And now really with finessing, it's a lot about dry brushing areas of just subtle complexity, and I think that is a really fun part for me. So now I'm just trying to get those subtle highlights in the balcony with the round brush just a little bit. If it's too much, it's going to be too much, too glaring to the eye. You can see also that I have defined the lake a little bit, the shore of the lake just a little bit. There is a pathway in the reference image, but I chose not to include that. I just want to keep that area as simple as possible. There's also some, I can't really tell, but there's some plants right by the balcony that catch the glow, which is nice and green. And now I'm also poking in back some sky. So I also like this technique as well. I'll paint the big mass of the tree first and then poke the sky back in later and paint back the sky holes. So that again is sort of an inverse way of thinking. I'm just poking in a little bit. I hope you can see my painting okay. I'm trying to keep it vertical, but I tend to hold it at a weird angle, so I'm sorry about that. I'm trying to push it down a little bit now. Now, a few things I want to work on with touching up this painting is including some painting in some trees in the background that stand out from the back mass. And you can see in the reference, it's really subtle. There are a couple of trees tree trunks that you can see extend up past into the sky. And I want to try to paint that. Now it's going to be really tricky because the value change is really subtle. If you squint, almost everything just blends in. So that is the harder, the more closer the value ranges in an area, the harder it is to paint, certain elements that have similar value range. So here's a zoomed in version you can see me trying to tackle. The other thing is, right now what I'm doing is I'm trying to create, just get more crispness in the foreground branches. What I did first was I took the round brush and I mixed some yellow and white and I just dragged a really dry brush technique over the tree trunk to get those foreground elements, but it wasn't enough. So right now I'm going back in with my flat brush, carving out some shadow shapes to further create that contrast. Also smudging some edges just a bit. Sometimes it's cool when you smudge the edges, you can get even more color shift and color variation. The water sometimes does something. So now you can see I'm trying to just indicate some trunks. Not too much, because if it's too much, it will be jarring to the eye. It's like, whoa, why are those things so detailed? They're in the background, So it's really, really, it takes practice to make sure how much detail you want to give to certain elements that are not your focal point in the background. As you can see here, I'm just putting really small areas of thicker paint, and that gives the painting a little bit of depth. I can explain a little bit of complexity and depth. Taking the round brush, finessing. It's all about finessing at this point. And for the people were tricky, but they weren't as hard as I thought. I just created some shapes, and then just to outline them, it sounds easy, I just created some shapes with a round brush, and then just to give them that nice highlight, rim light that they have. You mix a lot of white, mostly white with yellow, and just make sure you put it on an area strategically, and that's what separates them even more from the backlit tree. So you have the people, the backlit tree, and then this large area of shadow. So at this point in finessing, it's really, for me, it's really about edge control and really pushing those edges that you want to be harder or more textural and softening other areas so that you don't have too much of chaos everywhere, or everywhere is too soft, like I said before. And I'm also working on just defining more areas. So again, it's keeping on squinting all the way. I feel like my English is going terrible. I'm sorry. You just keep on squinting all the way to see what you can keep finessing. And any changes I do now will be really subtle. They're going to be really subtle color shifts. Like right now, I'm just trying to lighten the bottom of the tree trunk a little bit, just to get those little lavender flicks a little bit more. And you can see here, I'm using just a little bit of water to smudge some areas. I want the texture of the leaves of the backlit willow tree to really be around the people. And in the higher areas, I really feel like it could be softened a little bit with just some areas of select texture. You can see here, I'm just trying to create some highlights. Not highlights, sorry, but some lighter areas to indicate some tree trunks in the back. But too much and it already will be too much. So it's really just got to be really careful here. But it's okay if it's too much, or you happen to put too much, which I do all the time, just smudge it out with some water and mix back that color. Sound easier said than done. Oh, and right here I just used a paper towel, which I found can be a really cool technique. Just to smudge down the paint a little bit. So sometimes if you don't want to use your brush, you can use a dry paper towel, and it sort of evens out the value a little bit of the color. Here I am now trying to just define the shape of the pagoda of the balcony a little bit more. Because, obviously it's a structure, and that part of the structure is going into the water. So it can't be floating, and it's really just a subtle value change because everything's in shadow there, so you really have to be careful. And at this point, it's just going to be a matter of warm and cool shifts. The cooler shadow with the warmer areas of the pagoda, of the balcony structure, and that's what's going to give the impression of the balcony. So like I said before, use a dry brush technique to add some subtle color shifts in the end. This is really my favorite. It's so fun. So what I do is I almost wait till my palette is drier. Sometimes it helps to wait for your palette, the color to dry up just a little bit. And then I will just really, really dry mix the colors on my brush and lightly drag it onto my painting. And this is a really good way to get some final highlights in some areas, some subtle lighter value shifts in the shadows, things like that. So you can see I use that to just add a little bit of lighter area in the leaves on top of the yellow, and it's just really fun to play around with that. I would highly recommend that. So here's how the final image turned out. I hope you like it. You can see the color's a little bit more vibrant. I don't think the camera captured a little bit all the saturation. But you can see I added some water reflection, just some blue horizontal strokes to indicate more of the water. But other than that, you basically saw almost the whole process. So I really hope you enjoyed that. So to check out more of my artwork, please visit my website at TiffaniMang.com and my Instagram at TiffaniMangArt. I also have all my tutorials up on my Gumroad and my YouTube. And I'm really curious to see what you guys want to see, so please comment below and I would love to hear from you guys. So that's it, and I hope you guys tune in for more tutorials, and for now, have a great day. Bye.